Hello, welcome to Art History with Becca. I'm Becca. As you can see today, this is not a green screen. This is a real place. This is the chapel that is in the building of our school. And today we are going to be talking about medieval art, and specifically we're going to be talking about a period, a short window in medieval art called Gothic art. And in Gothic art, there was a lot of stained glass windows and cathedrals and churches built. And so I thought, hey, why not come into our very own chapel for this webinar? And I just wanted to let you know, too, a little bit about the school. So we bought this building we opened this school in 1976. So this building, before we bought it, was a Catholic training school for priests who were going to go into the Catholic Church. So they built this chapel and they used this chapel for their services. And we don't use it the same way that they did. We use it as a performing space where we do choir concerts because we are not a religious school. But we do have this beautiful building, and we just don't have the heart to turn it into anything else because this is such a beautiful room. So we have this beautiful chapel, and this is where we are going to be learning about Gothic art today. And it's going to be super fun. I took some close-up pictures of some of the windows, and we're going to be talking about the space a little bit. And with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. So today, I just want to make sure you have your art supplies ready. So you need some like black paper, some solid paper, something like this. This is just construction paper. You need to have coffee filters. These are just round, circular coffee filters. Hopefully you can find some of these in your kitchens at home. If you don't have coffee filters, you can use, that tissue paper that comes in presents. You can use that, especially if it's white. That'd be really good for the painting part. If it's colored, that's fine. We can still use that too. So just some like really thin paper. Coffee filters are the best thing if you have it. And then I have, this is my watercolor paint palette. You can use if you have a Crayola watercolor paint palette, that's fine too. So this is my watercolors, and it's basically the same thing, except for my paints come in little tubes and I squeeze them out into the little pockets. If you don't have watercolor paints, that's fine too. I have a contingency, I have markers. So you can use these. These are just Crayola markers that are washable. So they like bleed if you get them wet, which is good. And then I've got glue and tape. Tape is probably going to be the easiest. If you don't have tape, you can use glue. And then I also have a white pencil, a regular pencil, and a fine-tipped marker. You can use a marker or you can use a pen. So this is what I'm using, is just a marker. Alrighty, so with that, we're gonna get started. Oh, I also have this is just a paper cup, and this is a paintbrush, and all that is in here is water. I just dripped water on my table. I'll clean that up. I've got some paper towels. So with that, we're going to get started, okay? So I'm going to first go to a slideshow, and I'm going to keep talking, and I'm just going to show you pictures, and we're going to talk about medieval art. We're going to talk about Gothic art. If you have any questions, put them in the Q&A box. I've got a computer right here so that I can answer your questions. And if I'm going too fast, going too slow, if you want to know a little bit more about something, Q&A box. And we've got a bunch of students on. Hello, everybody. It's good to see some names from previous classes. And I see some new ones too. Someone says I don't have a white pencil. A white crayon could work. And I mean, really, you could use a regular pencil. So you're going to be fine. Oh, and scissors. I forgot my scissors. But my assistant James is going to get me some scissors, and you need scissors too. So with that, we're going to get started. We're going to do the artsy crafty part at the end of this, where we make something, and But first we're going to talk about the history of art and the history of medieval art, specifically a little time period in medieval art called Gothic art. All right. Let's get started. So here is, let me go back to my screen share and let me go to the correct pictures. Okay, so Gothic art, medieval art, there's the classical period, which is Greek and Roman art, and then there is the medieval period, which is kind of this period in between, it's in between classical art and the Renaissance. So the medieval period, a lot of things happened in this time period that kind of changed the way we do art. So in the Greek and Roman times, there was these Greek gods, these Roman gods, there was 12 of them, and this was kind of the religion of the time. So, somebody asked me, what is CE? So there's this little abbreviation that says CE, so that's the Common Era. So that is the time period we're living in right now. And so there's a kind of a agreed upon time in history where we started counting from 1. So like way back when there was like dinosaurs and cave art and all of that, that was before the Common Era. So you'll see over in Greek and Roman art, there's BCE, which is before the Common Era. And then you'll see right in the middle of the classical period, it goes to 0. And that's where we started counting like years, the way we count them now. So that was year 0, and moving forward from there, that is the Common Era, which we are living in year 2020 of the Common Era. All right, so moving forward, the Greek and Roman gods, and they there was 12 of them, and this was kind of the religion. They all had different like superpowers. If you've read the Percy Jackson books, you probably know a bit about these guys. So this was kind of the religion. And what happened in the medieval times is it switched from, people kind of just switched religions, and they switched from that kind of pagan religion to Christianity, where they focused on one God. And there's different variants of this too, because it went into lots of different directions. So here we have the Roman Empire. So you see on the right, there is all that land that is in red, that was the Roman Empire. So that was their land, and their capital was in Rome. Rome is still a city in Italy today. And then what happened was in the medieval era, kind of what starts the beginning of it is the king at the time moved the capital from Rome to Constantinople. And then after that, the Roman Empire kind of divided into 2. So then it was the Roman Empire and the Byzantine Empire. And then it kind of divided into 3. And then so there was the Roman Empire, the Byzantine Empire, and the Arab Caliphate. And so that is kind of what happened. And what happened too was the Byzantine Empire was more protected with like mountains. So the Germanic tribes could not go and fight them and try and take over their land as much. And so the Byzantine Empire and the Arab countries kind of shared art, they shared math, they shared science, and they kept a written history of time. Whereas in the Roman Empire, they were not as protected by mountains. And so the Germanic tribes came in and invaded a lot. There was a lot of wars. There was hundreds of years of wars. And so you'll see a lot, this is a medieval painting of war. And this was the time period where castles were invented, armor was used, there was just a lot of fighting and a lot of uncertainty. And it created a lot of uncertainty in life. Like, you're not really knowing who your king's going to be in the next few years because we're at war again, and you're not really knowing, what jobs and life is going to be like, or who you're supposed to answer to. So it was a very confusing time. And that is why a lot of people switched to Christianity, is because they wanted something stable, and the church was providing that for them. It was providing a safe, stable place where they could worship, where they could look towards the future, look towards something brighter than the chaos that they were living in. And up in the right hand corner here, that is a picture of some invasions from some Germanic tribes, kind of just a map of how they invaded the country. And this was only like 100-year period. So you can just see, if that was happening for like over 1,000 years, how kind of crazy your country would feel. And so you would want something that would be stable. Oh, someone says that they're wearing shorts in this art picture, and we're not really going to get into the clothing too much of this time period, but they wore tights. And so they're not actually wearing, they're not like naked legs, they have tights on, and that was kind of a normal thing for guys to wear. And the tights would fit well underneath your armor, so you could still move around. So the tights were kind of more like leggings. Yeah, so let's keep going. And so I've got, here's some more pictures. So this is just kind of, how war was fought was changed. They built all these castles with big walls, and just the way they invented cannons and catapults and battlements and archery. And so there's just a lot of war, a lot of chaos, and some other types of art. So we're getting into like some of the art of the medieval period. And this is Gothic art. So they had these big castles, and they were drafty and they were cold. So they made all of these tapestries. So these pictures are actually woven out of fabric, and they were woven by hand. And if you've ever seen one of these in a museum, they're really, really, really cool. It's just using different colors of threads, and they just wove them together and made these like magnificent pictures with them. And these things are giant, they're massive. They would cover an entire wall inside of a castle, and that would kind of help make the room warmer, so that you could stay warm at night in your castle. And here are some paintings that were done of the time, and they used gold as a paint, and they made them really, really decorative and pretty. But most of their art was about religion. So, and you can see in all of these pictures, they're very religious, and that was the art that they really focused on making. And these are all mosaics. So these are made out of little teeny tiny tiles, and they put them all over ceilings, and very decorative, but again, very religious. And they also had illuminated manuscripts, and if you were in my class earlier this week, we learned all about these. So these were basically really decorative picture books. Illuminated means that they drew it by hand, and manuscript is like a fancy word for saying like a handwritten book. So these were like hand-painted, hand-drawn books, very beautiful and very intricate. And that was another form of art from the Gothic period. Okay, so now we're going to get into Gothic architecture, which is kind of the bulk of what we're going to talk about today. So these are some Gothic cathedrals, and they were magnificent. They're still standing today. There's a lot of them, and they're just these big, giant, awesome buildings that people could get together as a group, something we can't do right now, but they would get together as a group, and they would celebrate their religion, and they would learn about their religion in these really beautiful spaces, and they put a lot of attention and time in making them beautiful spaces. And here is kind of what makes up Gothic architecture. So they have these things called ribbed vaults. So a vault is like a big domed ceiling made up of a bunch of arches. So this vault in this picture has lots of ribs. So it's got all these lines going and all these like support beams. So that's called a ribbed vault. And another distinctive thing about Gothic architecture is these big, giant, large stained glass windows. And they would get really, really, really big, sometimes 3-4 stories tall. So big, giant arches or windows. And they would have stonework holding them together. And then another thing was pointed arches. So you can see in the windows and in some of the interior structure of this cathedral interior, you can see a lot of pointed arches. So it's like doorways and windows, and not like square doors like we have now. They're like pointed arches. And that was a very Gothic thing to do. So here you can see some more ribbed vaults. And this one's a really cool ribbed vault. The whole ceiling has been painted, and it's just magnificent, the amount of color that they were able to get in there. And these stained glass windows are really fancy. And another thing about Gothic architecture is they brought in a lot of fancy details. So you can see a lot of fancy decorations inside of this cathedral. Oops, okay, good, I didn't skip too many. So I mentioned pointed arches. So here you can see a lot of pointed arches. So this is kind of like a building that's just got a lot of pointed arches, and that's an outside space that's not closed off to the weather. So it's just kind of like this outside covered walkway area. And then you've got these other pointed arches. This is another like outside kind of like a porch on a cathedral, or a walkway between buildings with these really magnificent pointed arches. And there's no glass in those ones on the front side, at least. And then this picture on the left is inside of another Gothic cathedral, where you can see not as fancy as those other ones, but still these big pointed arches and ribbed vaults. Forward. So then another really important thing to know about Gothic architecture is they're called flying buttresses. And a flying buttress is basically like this big support arm that held the building up. Because they made these buildings so tall, and the windows were like just a support to hold the building up, they had to figure out a new way to do that. So they made these like support arms, and they would make them very decorative and pretty too. And sometimes there'd be 3, 4, 5 layers of them. So you can see here's kind of the rounded end side of a cathedral and all the buttresses that are holding it up. And you can see the close-up, and then you can see on the bottom here, this is a drawing of one, a sketch kind of if you cut a cathedral in half. That is what the flying buttresses would look like, that are all supporting and holding that building up. Okay, so now let's talk more about stained glass. So stained glass they made these windows really, really, really tall and really detailed, and they usually included religious stories in the windows, and they sometimes included one whole window would be about one important person in their religion, or they would include lots of windows with a little picture. It's kind of like reading a comic book. So it's like this big picture of the story, and picture by picture of telling the story. So kind of like they do in a comic book, where it's like picture by picture telling you a story. And there wouldn't be words though, usually. So you would just kind of know the story from reading your Bible about what the story was in the picture. So here's some more really tall windows. And then there was this important shape that they used in a lot of pictures, and it's a circle. And they called it a rose window or a wheel window. And they called it a rose because it kind of looks like a flower or a rose petal if you were looking straight down at it. And it also kind of looks like a wagon wheel. So those are the two names that are known for it. And you see it a lot in Gothic architecture and in stained glass windows. And it's just a really beautiful way to do stained glass, and it's a really beautiful way to tell stories. And you'll even see it with just being colored glass and just pictures. All right. So next, okay, this is our chapel. So I want to show you, I'm going to change the camera angle and I'm going to go back to a picture of me so that you can look at our chapel. But this is some pictures that I took so you can kind of get some close-ups. So I just want you to kind of pay attention to some of these close-ups, and I want you to kind of, based on what we just learned about Gothic architecture, look at this building and see if you can notice any things that they used when they built this. So I'm going to go back to our camera here. All right, so go ahead and put it in the Q&A if you notice anything, and we're going to change the camera angle. So we're looking at the windows and how this building is made. And do any of you see anything that we talked about? We talked about arches. We talked about vault ceilings. We talked about rose windows and shapes. So go ahead and put them in the Q&A if you see anything. Pointed arches, yes. Big stained glass windows, yes. All right. I see arches at the roof. Yes, there's these big support beams that hold our roof up. I don't know if we can get, oh good, we can. Okay, yeah, so you can see all the support beams that hold up the roof. And if you look back there in the front of the chapel, there is a dome, like kind of semicircular stage area, and that is actually kind of more of a domed ceiling. Decorative details, yes. Someone's asking who's putting the camera up. Yes, it's James. James is here helping me. I see arches, good, good. All right, so now I am going to just point out a few things that that we didn't get in the Q&A. So there is all these windows, and if you can go back up, yeah, there we go. So you can see in the windows, hopefully, that there's a different person in each window, and those are like a story from the Bible, and each one of these people are a certain specific person. And then you can also see at the very top of each window, there is a rose. And there's actually 3 roses. There's a big one in the middle, and then there's 2 that are kind of on the sides. And then you have all these decorated like arches that are filled in with pictures and just kind of decorations. And then if you look at the very top, I don't know if you can see these details, but there's lots of little flower-like carvings along the top edges of the roof, and there's all these carvings in our beams that are just really beautiful. And there's these, up in the front, there's these carved, kind of just into the wall arches. And back when this was a Jesuit training facility for the church, they did have a whole altar up there, and they had wood pieces with altar for their God. We don't have that anymore. We use this as a choir event space where we have choir concerts, and the sound in here is really, really nice for that. It echoes really well. And then you can see up above those arches, there's another kind of window. It looks like a window. It's not actually a window. It's got just a screen in it. And my guess is whenever this was a working chapel, they would go back there, and that could be a place where they could listen to the sermon but not be seen. And they had those a lot in chapels for a lot of different reasons. So that is our chapel. And I'm going to go back to the pictures now so you can see some of the close-ups that I took of our chapel. So you can see the vaulted arch up in the front there. You can see the vaulted domed ceiling, and you can see the roses a little better in this one picture, and you can see kind of all the details. So how they did these details is there was just colored glass, and then they painted the details on top of it. And there's another kind of stained glass too that was important. And it's this yellow over on the right-hand side. It's just this yellow glass, and it doesn't have the same like colorfulness of other stained glass, but it was kind of one of the first kinds of stained glass that they used. And what it does is it just kind of changes the light color from outside to inside, so it kind of gives this bright sunshiny effect. And if you're looking at the picture in the bottom right, so that is if you're standing on the stage of the chapel and looking back, you can see through the doorways, there's that yellow golden glow coming in there, and that is from those yellow stained glass windows. And so the yellow stained glass windows were actually the first kind of stained glass windows. They didn't do all the colors and they didn't do all the pictures. They didn't have that technology first. They had the yellow stained glass window picture first. Okay, so I just have one more picture. So this is from last year. This is our spring festival last year, and this is how we use this space. We use it for choir concerts. We have a symphony, and it's just a beautiful space for them to perform in, and it just makes beautiful echoey sounds that you can really enjoy the space. So that is a choir concert from last year. Okay, so now we're going to talk about how stained glass windows are made. So glass actually is made from sand, and the sand is called silica, and the different colors are achieved by using ground up metals that they add to the sand. And when they cook it, it gets the metals change the color of the glass. So they mix it all together, and then they put in these really, really, really hot ovens that are so hot that they melt the sand into liquid glass. And then they pour that glass into molds, or they blow it into shapes such as bottles, or they use this big kind of rolling pin where they roll out the glass. And you can see in the bottom left, that is an medieval painting or drawing of a glass factory and what that might have looked like at the time. And then on the right, that is a modern glass factory. So they still use some of the same technology in making glass. All right, and so here, and they're still making stained glass today. So this is modern stained glass. And it's just such a beautiful form of art that they use it in all different creative ways. So here's a building down in the right. There's a building that the whole building basically is stained glass. And I bet you when the sun is pouring through, it's just a beautiful place to be in, because there's probably just this big rainbow all around you. And then up and above that is a ceiling that has some colorful glass, and you can see what it must be like to be in that building. And then this this little car is actually got a light bulb inside, so it kind of does like it projects the light outward, and it's actually a night light. And here's another building where you can see the outside and the inside of all this striped glass and just kind of the beautiful effect that it creates. And here's some other ceilings. So this is just more modern stained glass. So it's kind of made in the same way as stained glass was, just with more modern technology. Glass used to, over time, it would kind of change shape. Gravity would pull it down. So if you're ever in a really old building and it's got the original windows, if you look at the windows, they've kind of melted and changed shapes, and the glass will be thicker at the bottom than it is at the top. And that's a problem with old buildings and keeping those windows in good repair. Even in our chapel, these windows are almost 100 years old, so they have some problems like that too. But in modern glassmaking technology, they figured out how to not have that happen. So in your house, if it's a newer house, it probably doesn't have old windows that are going to melt and change shape. And it's not really melting, it's more just gravity slowly over time pulling it down. Okay, so that's modern stained glass. So now this is a diagram of how, skipped ahead. This is a diagram of how stained glass is made. So they get these metal that used to be lead, and they make the shape of the outlines of what's going to hold the glass, and then they make all the glass pieces and carefully cut it to fit in there. And they used pre-colored glass. They paint the glass, they put special decorations on it, and then they have a special process where they make it secure and make it tight. And then they fit it into a window. So stained glass, the person who's making the stained glass has to be in really good coordination and communication with the person who is building the building, because they want to make sure that the window will fit really well. You don't want to make a whole stained glass window and then find out that you made it just a little bit too big for the building that's being built. That would be unfortunate. Okay. So next, this is going to be our art project for today. So we are going to make stained glass windows. We're going to use our coffee filters, and we're going to use some black paper, and we're going to make these roses or wagon wheel styled stained glass windows, and we're going to get to that now. So I'm going to go back to my face. Hello. So now we're going to just do arts and crafts. So I've got my black piece of paper, and if you want to get your black piece of paper and follow along. I don't know if you've ever made like a paper snowflake before in the wintertime. It's kind of the same process. So I am going to take this black piece of paper, and I'm going to fold it so that the short flat side is matching up with the long flat side, and this corner is staying together. So I'm just kind of folding that up, just like that. So now you should have kind of like a rectangle that's just like sticking out, and this is folded like this. And now I'm going to fold this again, but I'm going to fold it this way. So now I've got this like triangle shape, and I'm going to fold it again like this. Okay, so that's going to be fine for this first one. So now it's folded like that. And you can keep folding, keep folding, keep folding if you want to. And now I'm going to take this coffee filter, and it's already a lovely circle shape. So I'm going to fold it in half again, and in half again. Now I'm going to use this, and I'm going to set it on top of my folded black paper. And I'm going to use my white pencil, and you can use a regular pencil. It's just a little harder to see. And I'm going to just kind of trace the outside edge here. So now you can see I just traced the edge of my coffee filter. So when I start cutting out the shapes, I don't want to cut on the outside of this, because this kind of marks the limit of where my glass is going to fit. Because if you see on this one, I didn't mark it, and so then I have these holes because my coffee filter is smaller than the holes that I cut. So unless you want that, might be fine. So that is going to be kind of the limit of where I cut. And so now I've got my scissors. Haha, they magically appeared. Thank you, James, for getting those for me. Okay, so if you've got this folded and you don't have coffee papers, and you're just going to use tissue, that's fine. I'm going to show you how to do that. The main thing is to get your black paper folded like this. Don't worry so much about that line. You can just draw kind of a circular shape just like that on your piece of paper. So now I am going to use my scissors, and I'm just going to cut just a little bit further. Woo! Uh-oh. These scissors aren't going to work too great. I think there's a really good pair in my office. All right, so I'm going to give you a minute to catch up, because my scissors are not going to work this way. All right. Okay, so I'm going to do the black folding paper again so that you can follow along with that while I wait for scissors So you got your full piece of paper. I'm going to fold it in, and it's okay if your paper's not black. It could be really any color. Black just kind of gives you the same feeling that a stained glass window does, but as you saw with those modern stained glass windows, they used all different kinds of colored metal to hold it together. So fold it in half again, and again, I just got the short side of the paper and lined it up with the long side of the paper like that, and then I folded that over, and so now that's lined up, and then I fold it over again. So there was that. And then I took my coffee filter and I folded it in half. And then I folded it in half again. And I folded it in half one more time. I placed it on my black piece of paper. And I traced that so that I had that nice kind of little arched shape. Okay, so these scissors are gonna go over here now. Got some good scissors. And I am going to finish cutting. And huzzah, they did not break. All right, so now you see I've just got like a little extra edge. And I know that I'm not gonna cut any shapes. So this is kind of fun. So now you can just kind of make your own drawing on here. So this is gonna be what I cut out. So I am going to cut, I'm gonna draw it on mine. You can draw it, or you can go freestyle and cut whatever shapes you want. If you've made paper snowflakes, this is very similar concept. So you can just kind of go freestyle like that. But I am going to do like this. So that is the shapes that I'm going to cut out. And it's important to leave some fold here. So I'm not going to cut this little bit out. I'm not going to cut this little bit out. It's important to not cut this full edge out. You want to leave it connected, or else it won't have any thing to support itself, and you'll have some trouble. Okay, so now I'm going to cut out those shapes that I drew. And again, you can draw those shapes with a regular pencil or a white crayon if you don't have a pencil. That's fine. So I'm cutting out those shapes. One more shape. Okay. These are just little scraps of paper to go in the trash with that other pair of scissors. All right. So now it's all cut out. Okay. So now I know I'm running low on time. I think I'm going to have to go a little bit over. I hope you guys are okay with hanging out with me for just a little bit so that we can get through the project. So now I cut it out, and there's a pretty cool looking shape once I open it up, okay? So now what you're going to do is you're going to get your coffee filter or your tissue paper, and now you're going to make your stained glass. So I got one, I'm going to smooth it out, and I've got my watercolor paints over here. So I'm going to first show you the way to do it with watercolored paints, and then I'm going to show you the way to do it with markers. So I just stick my paintbrush in the water, get some of my paint, get it working, and then I'm just going to kind of just have fun and just make a fun, pretty colors. I'm not going to spend too much time on a specific design, but if you want to choose a specific design, that's fine. So I'm just going to do kind of a red color in the middle, and then I'm going to do a blue color outside of that. And then I'm gonna do yellow, not yellow, on the outside edge. Until it is all colored in. All right, so now it is all colored in, and it is very delicate because it's all wet and soggy. I'm going to clean off my table. This is just watercolor, so it will not stain my table. And then I got some paper towels. You can just let it dry a little bit. Okay, so you kind of have to let this dry a little bit or else it's gonna get this wet. But the idea is that this will get taped or glued on top of this, and then you will end up with a beautiful stained glass window looking thing. So I am going to show you kind of how that can look. And depending on what shapes you put there, it will change how this looks. And what you're gonna do, I actually made ahead of time one. So I'm gonna use the one that I made ahead of time. So this one has had a little bit of time to dry. So I can put it now on here and I can use some tape. Oh, and the side that I drew on, my white line, is right here. So I'm gonna make that the back side. It's always fun whenever the magic of art is a little bit always of leaving the person who's looking at it curious on how you made it. It's a secret. Okay, so now, alrighty, stained glass window. Okay, now, really quick, I am going to show you the marker way, and then we're going to end off. And I hope you make lots of stained glass windows today and send me your pictures. You can send them to events@delphian.org, or you can send them to our social media on a private message. So another way you can do it is you can get your markers and you can just kind of color in your shapes however you want. And I have some that I had my 4-year-old daughter help me color in before this class. So you can get really colorful and they can get really awesome. And then all you have to do is get water and a paintbrush and paint it. If you don't have a paintbrush, you can just get a paper towel wet and dab it. The whole idea is to get it really wet so that the colors start blurring together. And then you let that dry and put that on the back of your paper, and you can have a really cool, modern, arty looking stained glass window. And it's really fun. So I hope you make tons of stained glass windows, and I hope you fill your entire houses with stained glass windows, and there's just beautiful rainbows filtering in the afternoon sun, and you just make some beautiful art today. And that is all for me. I hope you've enjoyed this class. I'll be back next week with more art. If you would like to download, there's a coupon for this really cool art. It's kind of like an art dictionary that Heron Books is selling. It's by a wonderful artist named Natasha. There's a 30% off code that Heron is offering through our online classes right now. So you can go on there and you can buy this book and learn even more about art, learn some more technical terms. And that's it for me. So thank you.